All right, welcome everybody. We are being recorded. Carolyn?
I should pull up the agenda. Where is it? Right here. Hello, everybody. We have our minutes taker. We are going to do, let's see, agenda and materials review. That is what we're doing now. So, is there any change to the agenda or materials review that we'd like to talk about? We have a quorum, so we're good.
Do we?
Four. We have four. We heard that Alan will not be attending. He's traveling and I think stuck somewhere because, you know, it's a big snowstorm out there. So what can you do? I haven't heard from Bill or Jose. And that's it. Yes. Okay. Any changes to the agenda or materials from anybody? Okay. Minutes approval. We get a chance to look over the minutes from last month. Any changes?
I move that we accept the minutes as presented.
I don't know if I should abstain for that kind of vote if I wasn't there. So I'm happy to second that. I'll second. I was there.
So we will approve the minutes as presented to us. Comments from board members and community liaisons, commission liaisons. So we have Michael here, but we don't have Jose. But we can just do our general comments as well. Michael, do you want to get us going on that?
Sure. Yeah, so the police commission last month had a DEI training with Johnny Lake, who's great. And he was good as usual. I don't think we discussed a specific policy, did we? I'm looking at Leah for confirmation, but I don't think we did.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it was all Dr. Lake, if I remember right.
The one thing that would be of interest maybe for Jose would be that the Human Rights Commission's liaison changed and has been kind of like vacant for a little while and ish. So that probably maybe it's the same issue as with their liaison to this meeting and their ability to be in touch with Jose. I know he had trouble contacting them. So hopefully that's all resolved now that they got their new person up for the, maybe, do we have a representative from HRC today?
We're going to be electing that this evening.
No,
I meant them to us.
Oh.
Yeah, so maybe they're still getting their ducks in a row.
Just side note, Beatrice and I looked into this today and are working on that issue. Oh, Jose just emailed and he's on his way.
Okay.
Don't they have like 7 openings on HRC? I think when I was applying, it was more openings than we had. I remember that much. And it seemed like it was a pretty big number. I don't remember how big the board is, but I remember it was a lot of people. So,
Leah, how big, or Beatrice, how big is that board? Do you know, that commission?
I feel like it's about a dozen.
Okay.
That sounds about right. I can look it up real quick, but I think they're looking to fill 4 positions during this recruitment process, if I'm not mistaken. So I'll get back to you on that.
Thanks, Beatrice.
All right, Bernadette, since you're unmuted, do you want to share your comments?
sure, I probably always forget to mute myself. So many different ways. I don't really have anything to add. Well, we don't have a training topic this time. I did like the training topic last time. I appreciated the hearing how EEA kind of, not EEA, EPA, whatever it was, the union guy.
EPEA.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I appreciated hearing their perspective because they're such an integral part of this. And so I think it's good for us to, hear the different pieces and parts and be able to kind of understand why they why they are the way they are, and how it helps the process from a different perspective. So otherwise, I don't have anything. I'll mute myself now.
Clay, do you have any comments?
Just to say hi, I'm sorry I missed last month, and I am sorry to have missed that conversation about the union. And so I look forward to future training topics. Work got in the way, and I apologize for that.
It happens. That brings me to one thing I was going to say is that you can always watch back and watch the video to get the training. And we're also talking about creating now that we have them on video, we might have a better catalog of trainings as we move forward. That's something that we're hoping to do. I don't think I have any other comment except that we were kind of briefly talking about it before, but we have 3 openings on the board right now. One of them will hopefully be a re-election or a reappointment. So just share with your people that this is a board that is open and that it is a useful board, and just share your experiences with it, so we can get some meaningful, worthwhile applicants.
Applications are open till Friday.
That's really soon. And Beatrice says there are 11 positions on the HRC webpage. So that means there are 11 people on the board and 4 openings. Am I seeing that right?
That's correct, Carolyn. Yep.
All right. So we're close enough to public comment time that I think we can open it up for that. And I don't see any public, so I don't think that there will be any comment. So should we move on? One thing that we are going to change I guess another comment that I'll make is we're working on the annual report, the CRB annual report, which is different than the auditor report. And as we were kind of going over some of the information that is included in it, we realized that it would be advantageous and interesting to have a more, we're going to pull some of if you've read it in the past, there was kind of a description of what the discussion was of each case. And we're going to not really do that. And we're going to link it to the minutes instead. So if people want like a Leah, I see you smirking. Is this okay that I'm saying this? Okay. We're going to link it to the minutes. So if people want to read through the minutes, they can do that. But we're going to have kind of more quantifiable data in the report. And one of the things that going forward would be helpful is if during the adjudication recommendations, I know we all kind of say like, I kind of agreed with the auditor, or I definitely agreed with the auditor. I definitely agreed with chain of command. We're going to be more specific when we get to that point. So just kind of be ready for that in the conversation, because I think that'll be easier when we're looking back at cases to see. I don't know if we're going to just quantify it completely and say 3 of the 7 members agreed with this, or if we'll actually say like Michael agreed or disagreed. Was there, I don't remember that. Lindsay, do you have any, or Leah?
No, that's how we discussed it, Carolyn. It's just when I went back and reviewed meetings from last year, sometimes it was unclear which adjudication people were agreeing or disagreeing with, even when I went back and watched the video and read the minutes. I think, yeah, so if people could just be a little bit more explicit, like that would be super helpful for the record.
It's true. If you say I agree with the adjudication, if there are 3 different adjudications, that doesn't.
Totally. And sometimes I could gather it from context, and other times it was just really unclear and I felt uncomfortable guessing.
Right. I think that's the thing, is we're trying to make the report more fact-based with no interpretation. So it's all just what we see, and then the interpretation can come from the minutes. Right. Yeah. Okay. So when we get to that point of the cases, then just be ready to be courageous enough to share a strong opinion one way or the other. That's what I'm going to say. Although sometimes it changes. And that's the thing. When I was thinking about this, I was like, sometimes I'll say I agree. And then the discussion will happen and I'll be like, oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. Maybe I don't agree anymore. So if that happens, I think that's okay. And we can amend our initial statement. Bernadette?
Well, I wonder if they can just throw up a Google poll at the end of, after we have all of our final discussion on it. If we just throw up they throw up a Google poll that just allows us all to just kind of click, agree with the chief, agree with the auditor. I think that would be a pretty easy way, and then you'd have data. And Leah, I'm sure Lindsay is an expert in this with a little assistance from Rob. I'm sure the three of you will be able to figure it out. Just Jim Dandy. If not, there's teachers that know how to do Google polls. They do them all the time in their union meetings. So
You mean Zoom poll or Google poll?
a Zoom poll, sorry,
Okay.
Zoom poll, not Google poll.
All right, I
We'll
expect
work
to see
on that.
that in 45 minutes. I expect to have a Zoom poll. Just kidding.
Just a thought.
Maybe let's try it without it this time and see how it feels, and then we can.
I think
work
I
on it.
can actually throw one up. I'm gonna work on that.
But we want to do it for each allegation, right?
But you can do a poll right now as to if everybody wants to do a poll as a practice poll. See, we won't get to do these when we're in person.
That's true. Okay. Do we
We
want to
did
do
one before. I remember I voted wrong. And we had
I
to
have
revote.
done one before. It's right now shouting at me. You haven't made one for this meeting yet. So talk amongst yourselves. I'm working on it.
Yeah, I
And
think you have to do them before the meeting starts.
I think so too.
Yeah,
Thank
I don't
you,
know
Michael.
why.
Michael's a teacher.
Yeah.
Michael knows.
Yeah, no, this is totally thrown me off. Somehow it has to be done beforehand. It's so weird.
Okay, you guys, this is a lot. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the assignment.
All right, but we will have to vote later tonight, so we'll have to, I guess, I don't know. Hopefully it'll just be easy. Okay, Jose, hello, welcome. We just finished our comments from board members and commission liaisons, so do you have anything to add?
Not at this time. Thank you, Carolyn.
All right, you missed a lot of interesting stuff, so you'll have to watch the video. Okay. Well, I guess one thing we're going to do is we're going to be more explicit in our adjudication recommendations. So be ready for that at the end of the cases, and that'll all become clear when we get there. Leah, are you, or somebody who's going to share the case?
Rob is going to share the case.
Oh, good. Leah, you keep working on the polls and Rob shares the case.
Yep, give me 1 second. I'm not a techie. So. All right, how's that?
I cannot see anything, Rob,
All right, well,
but if you want Lindsay or I could share and you could speak.
you cannot modify advanced settings.
Hold on. Let me try one more thing.
No, it says I'm the host now. Here we go. Let's try
Yeah.
this again.
Oh, now I definitely can't do a poll.
All right, I think it's gonna work this time. I'm feeling good. How about now?
Good job.
Yeah, I'll mess it up in a second. Don't get too cocky. Okay, slideshow. Okay, so 2 cases tonight, and let's get into the first one. So we've got the allegations for inadequate preliminary investigation, failure to know and enforce laws, report incidents, submit evidence, and untruthfulness. So the summary of the facts: Officer A was dispatched or a harassment call, and then the reporting person, who was a concerned mother, reported that her 16-year-old daughter had been contacted by an unidentified person through Snapchat. and this unidentified person had some sensitive photos of the female. So the officer A went and spoke to the mother and the 16-year-old daughter, and they explained to Officer A that the unidentified person was demanding additional nude photos for a certain amount of time. And if he didn't get those new photos from the 16-year-old female, he would post those photos online, embarrass her. So after some interviewing of the mother and the 16-year-old female, Officer A made some recommendations for the 16-year-old to limit her social media, maybe take a break, and the unidentified person would go away if she didn't respond. And then let's see, and he also talked about the difficulty Officer A did of the person, because he could be halfway around the world and identifying somebody would be difficult because of the anonymity of Snapchat. And so then Officer A had the 16-year-old female provide some evidence of her interactions with the person. She didn't have all of it, but she had some of it. And then Officer A provided business cards to the mother and daughter and kind of asked them if they got any information about the identity to please contact them. So the contact ended, and then Officer A didn't write a report of his contact with the 16-year-old female and didn't transfer custody of the evidence that he collected into evidence. And then we had a couple of lieutenants get involved. So Lieutenant C was informed by Lieutenant D about Officer A's investigation and the shortcomings of that. So Lieutenant D assigned another officer to contact the reporting person, the 16-year-old female. And then Lieutenant C initiated an internal affairs investigation for Officer A's handling of the investigation. And then the additional charge for truthfulness, allegation for truthfulness, was added because during the IA interview, Officer A stated that his or her supervisor, Sergeant B, stated that a report wasn't required for the contact with the reporting person. And then, of course, Sergeant B was also interviewed, and Sergeant B stated that he or she didn't recall making any comment about the requirement of a report. So then we have our allegations that you all are familiar with. And then this was the recommendations. So the chief came down and said that the first two were unfounded, 3 and 4 were sustained, and there was insufficient evidence. So he agreed with chain of command and the auditor a little bit, or with the auditor with 3 and 4 and 5. And so then now we're going to get into discussion time. So I'll let you start, Carolyn, or?
Yes.
And just sorry if
And this is
Rob-
my first time, so feel free if you want to, if I missed something that I should have covered.
Rob, I think if you stop sharing and then make me host again, I can do that poll at the end of the discussion.
Okay, so stop share.
And Leah, you'll have all 5 of those adjudications ready for the poll?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I'm hoping we can kind of reshare that slide during the poll.
No,
No?
we
Okay.
won't be able to do that.
All right, how do I make you the host again?
I'll
if
send
you've
you a
lost-
text. I'll send you a
Okay.
text.
Okay, all right. Non-techies need help, thank you.
All right, so I will take over. We're going to discuss, first of all, complaint intake, classification, investigation, and monitoring. And I have an order in the chat. Jose, I'm sorry, I don't know how to do an accent, so it's not there. But Michael, can you start us off with complaint intake, classification, investigation, and monitoring, please?
Sure. So This one, the intake and classification were internal, right? So nothing on that. It's taken me 3 years and I finally got this formula down. As far as investigation, I mean, I think that I'm not sure which investigation to comment on. The initial investigation, right, because there's the initial investigation, then there's the later investigation. And I feel like that initial investigation, the quality of it, right, is one of the things that gets spoken to in the auditor's memo, right, as being sufficient given, right, what evidence was available. And then the later investigation is obviously like the handling of the case after that initial investigation. So it's weird to say that both investigations seem fine because there was clearly a problem, but the problem is, right, we'll talk about for later parts. So I guess I'm nothing more to say on intake, classification, investigation, monitoring. Did I get that right? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have much to add. I think there was discussion about how to classify the allegations originally, and sort of some back and forth. And I thought that was a healthy conversation, it seemed like. And so I liked to see that collaboration between the auditor's office and the police bureau, and trying to figure out what the right classification is. So I appreciated that. And the investigation was thorough enough to sort of redouble when there's something that was a little amiss, and make sure to track that down and investigate it further to make sure that every T was crossed and I was dotted. So yeah, I appreciated the depth and thoroughness of these factors.
I appreciated, this is when paper really helps me, because you had the allegations and then they added allegations and then you added more allegations. And so for me, being able to look at it on paper and seeing when each thing got added and what it was that triggered it. I think that's why I liked this case so much, because I don't know in all the time I've been on the board that I've ever seen one that has had so much discussion during the intake and during the classification and then adding things in, which to me is like a testament to how thorough the auditor's office is in working with IA about, really looking at what's going on. And I know, from all of our discussions that piling on is not something, that you guys are ever looking to do, which I think will become interesting when we discuss the difference between 2 and 3 in the in why one was sustained and one was not sustained. I think that'll be interesting. So I appreciated the intake, the classification, and the monitoring through the whole process, because this was probably the case that has shown the true, depth of what goes on in the auditor's office and IA probably more than anything. And I'm not sure if this is the right place to ask the question, but given that last time we had somebody from the union talking, I wondered why there was an attorney involved in the interview process that I don't know. I mean, there have been a couple of other times, but it's a rarity. And so I just didn't know what's why that comes into play. And then I'll have a few questions about some of the other processes and procedures, but.
So it's the officer's choice if they want to have the union attorney there as well. And in this case, when there's an allegation of untruthfulness, that tends to trigger a lot of feelings and fears. So, and I can't remember if the attorney was there for the first ones as well. And that I'll just say that this employee at the time had a lot of open IAs.
Okay.
So it was their choice to have that
Right.
representation.
And the attorney was there in the first one. I thought it was the truthfulness one that absolutely makes sense why you would bring in an attorney at that point. But the attorney was already there before the truthfulness allegation came up. So, all right, but that helps. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bernadette, you have more questions. You said they'll come up in like one of the next sections. Is that right? Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no, yeah, it just has to do, I think, with the policies and procedures that will come up towards the end, I think.
Okay. I thought it was appropriate, and I agree that I like the back and forth that happens. I think that, like Bernadette says, shows the efficacy of the system. I think that Ryan did a really good job with the investigation. I think he asked a lot of questions that were really helpful for me in understanding things, and I think that it'll also come up again in policies, practices, and training. But I just wanted to put that out there, that I appreciated Ryan's, I don't know how you did it, the questions you asked, and how your method. So I thought that was well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all for me.
I have a question that I want to use from in this round. I think it has to do with investigation. I think it would be helpful for us as we deliberate in the next few rounds. Can you tell me what the criteria for determining if someone was untruthful or not? What is the criteria for determining truthfulness?
Sorry, it took me a second to find the mute button. So there's the policy standard, which is willfully or knowingly. And then there's also the administrative law standard, which is when you're in a workplace investigation like this, the standard of proof is basically more likely than not. So it's a pretty low standard. It's the same as probable cause. But I would say that in my experience in this office, especially with something like untruthfulness or something that is a potential career-ending allegation, personally, my standard of proof is a little bit higher. I want to be really sure of that before I recommend that be sustained.
Okay, so when you said this in the administrative sense, more likely than not means more likely truthful than not.
Sorry, I apologize. I was not clear. No, that means, so that's like whenever there's an allegation that the alleged behavior happened or not, it's more likely that this occurred than it did not occur, and that it was a violation of policy, right?
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Yeah, I just, to have like a responsible discussion about this, if the stakes are as high as the stakes seem high, right? Like, I think it's appropriate to kind of have a consensus, because there would seem to be facts established here. And so, yeah, I will have questions based upon, I mean, if it's willfully and knowingly, that's a pretty squeaky thing to get out of.
Well, and
it's a very low standard.
It's a really hard thing to prove.
Yeah, exactly. Like we can't prove intent. There's no evidence for that necessarily.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so EPD policies, practices, and training. Clay, will start with you with this round.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lack of clarity on the officer's part about what was established practice and policy. And I don't know if that requires more training or if that was just, the bad call. And I think that was kind of talked about, in the investigation and with the supervisor. Seems like supervisors agreed that this was not general practice or policy to approach the situation this way. So I don't know that I have recommendations or other comments aside from that. It seems like there didn't seem like an opening for additional training or additional policy or anything that was outside the realm of what was contained already in the investigation. So that's it.
Can I jump in for 1 second? Sorry.
Yeah.
Jose, I just realized I was wrong. The knowingly or willfully is in the new version of the policy. It is not the version of the policy that was in place when this was investigated.
So which
So-
are we using?
Right, so if you look at the very end of the final file, there's a section that has the policy there, and it says, I can put it in the chat so everybody has access to it. But it just says you shall be honest and truthful in giving testimony, rendering a report, that kind of thing. So I think they're actually, the sort of mental state requirement was added after this case. Not to
Thank
throw
you.
everybody off, but we are talking about policy, so I was hoping I would make sure to correct that. So I'll put it in the chat for everybody.
So that would seem that an omission to a direct question could be considered dishonest just as much as specifically outright lying in an answer to something. But the policy is now changed to say that only an outright lie would be untruthfulness. Am I getting that? Is that what we're understanding then?
Sorry, yes, I'm madly trying to paste at the same time and I forget that I can't actually multitask all that great. But yes, from what I heard from what you said, yes, that's what.
Okay. So with regards to policy, and this might be a question that I need Ryan's help on, is at one point, the officer indicated that a report was not done because, and I think I wrote this quote down correctly, there was no solvability to it. And I'm just wondering, is that kind of a standard, or is that just a shorthand? Or, I mean, where would that come from? Because in my mind, if you find a baggie of heroin on the ground, there's no solvability to it. You take it. I don't know if you have to put it into evidence to have it destroyed, so therefore you have to get a case number, or if you just have a process to destroy that, because that no solvability, no report makes sense to me. Okay, but there are lots of crimes that we would on first blush think are not solvable, but one would still expect the police to do a report. Am I, is that making sense what I'm kind of asking?
Yeah, it's totally making sense what you're asking. And I mean, there are a lot of reports that we take that we are solvability for, and I don't remember that term, but you read it more currently than me, or more recently than me, but there isn't, the solvability is low, but we're still taking a report. That doesn't make the decision on whether a report should be taken or not. So yeah, I think you're right on track.
Okay, and then to follow up the no solvability and evidence. So if you were to come upon a piece of a crime, such as a bag of heroin on the ground, can you walk me through what the process on something like that would be?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you'd pick it up, you'd retrieve it, you'd get a case number, you'd write a really short report that says that I found this piece of evidence, or I found this heroin or whatever baggie of drugs on the ground. I have no idea where it came from, and I'm lodging it to be destroyed. But you would definitely write a report on that.
So you get a report, even though, I mean, yes, you have evidence of a crime and it's going to be destroyed, and we're not going to investigate any further. And so I think that's where I was just like making sure that I understood the policy here, that that it's not the solvability that requires a case. And it's as soon as you take evidence of any kind, you would always get a case number.
Correct.
And is that clearly written in the policy? Because as I went through all of this, I got lost in a lot of policy stuff. Is it pretty clear that it's like, if you take evidence in, that you must get a case number and put it into evidence? Like,
Yeah,
within a certain period of time?
I haven't looked at that in quite a while. To me, it's like muscle memory, like that. There's no question that that's what you would do. And I believe that from my memory, it's pretty clear in the policy, but I don't know, Leah, do you have any? Sorry, I know you're copying and pasting. I haven't looked at our evidence policy recently. It's been a while, but I think it's pretty clear in there that if we gather any evidence whatsoever, we need to take a case number and write a report and lodge that evidence. Would that be accurate in your opinion?
I would say that's another thing that sounds very true. But I need to go through the policies really quick, and I can do that.
I
Well,
just want to jump in.
one of
And,
those things. Oh, go ahead,
sorry, I
Jose.
just wanted to jump in and say I'm looking at 103.5.22 report and evidence submission, and it says all reports must be submitted in accordance with the department's report system manual. And so that policy is linking us to a different thing. And I think I'm following where Carolyn's going here, and I would like to let Carolyn continue.
I think you mean Bernadette.
I'm sorry, Bernadette, excuse me.
That's okay. We all look alike. I get that. So it's my hair. So I guess to me, I guess it was one of those things that it just seemed so common sense-ish to get a case number and lodge this in evidence that it's like, but I also know that even the most basic things in policing are written down in a policy. And I guess that's where it was just like, it kind of was just, it was kind of blowing my mind. And I think I saw that in your questioning, Ryan. It was like, because at some point it was just like, it was like, there's just this incredulousness to like, wait, you didn't get a case number? I'm like, because the officer is the person who has sole control over getting a case number and then lodging the evidence that they have. So I guess it seems like a pretty basic policy review to have to do that I don't think you should have to do it. I mean, somebody should, it's just too basic. It's just too basic to have to review with somebody or be trained on. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, so that was a lot of what I thought too. The EPD policies and practices and training. It seemed like this officer could definitely benefit from further training on some of these kind of things that they did during the after the investigation. I did feel like the way that they handled the initial investigation was thorough and it was respectful, and I don't have any complaints with that, except perhaps that the officer did tell the reporting party and the child that it seemed like they were saying that they were going to take it further, and that clearly didn't happen since they didn't even file a report. And I guess I'm confused about how, I understand, like, if you find some photographs of an underage person laying on the side of the road, like, to take Bernadette's metaphor and keep going, I wouldn't think that would be a report that would need to be filed. But my feeling, and maybe Ryan, I would like to hear more about this, but like, when I started on this board and like as a human being in Eugene, I just assume that anytime that there's police interaction and the public is making a complaint and the officer kind of suggests ways that it could move forward, that would be a report. Like, I'm surprised that not every interaction isn't reported in some way. I know that maybe it won't become a case, but I feel like there should be some reporting to any interaction that happens. So I'm confused about that. Am I just wrong?
Well, it really depends on what the incident is. I mean, there are some times where people will come out and they'll call about, a dispute that they were in, and they tell you about the dispute, and there's no criminal act that took place when they describe it. And so we'll have a discussion. We'll talk about safety plans. We'll talk about, all these other things that maybe they should take into consideration, and that maybe wouldn't get a report taken. But if there's ever a time where somebody wants to prosecute, like they have a crime that they've described to an officer and they say, I want to move forward on this and I want to prosecute, we should always be writing that report. I mean, the report that we always write is if somebody says, yeah, I want to press charges, and the officer says there's probable cause there to do it, then you write that report, period. And in this case, I think if I remember correctly, again, I haven't reviewed it in a little while, but I think he had mentioned like there was nothing he could do to get any information from Snapchat, and there are avenues. So like we have detectives who have additional skills and additional training, and maybe not an expectation that an officer would know these things, but that's why we take these reports, because a detective might be working another case that's very similar, and they go, oh my gosh, I think this might be the same person that I'm working on this other case that's doing the same kind of thing to these other girls, and they can also subpoena records, and they just have more investigative tools and more experience. So that's why it is important for officers to take reports on things like this.
Okay, so generally,
but sorry, I digress a little bit, Carolyn, but to answer your question, we don't take reports on everything. But if there is a crime that we believe has been committed and they want to move forward with it, we absolutely take that report.
Okay, that makes sense. That clears it up for sure. And would you say that it's generally the practice that you would file a report in this sort of a situation? That would be the hope as like a training officer?
That would, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good. I'm glad to hear that that's kind of the feeling that is in the department. The thing that really struck me with the interaction with the family was that the officer brought up the detectives. I don't remember what they called it, like cyber detectives, that kind of thing. They brought it up to the people, and they also brought up that this would be a felony extortion. So it felt strange to me that they were throwing around these terms and these connections to what the department could offer, and then didn't follow through with it. And that's obviously disappointing to have out there, and that certainly doesn't help the trust with the department if that's what's happening. So yes, I am heartened to hear that is not what the expectation would be. Bernadette, you forgot to mention that this officer has been with the department for 5 years. Typically you do that. I think it's important in this case to see that it's not like a 6-month-old officer. This is somebody who should have a better sense of the policies and practices of the department. And I'll go ahead and say that for you.
Is it me now?
I think it's me. I think that there might be reason to update the 103.5.22 in the professional standards report and evidence submission. Now that, I don't know, I would love to hear what the rest of the board thinks about this, and maybe writing this down. All evidence collected has to be submitted, and a report must be written or something. C says, as soon as practicable, employees must submit photographs, evidence, and other required documents and products. I mean, it's kind of explicit. I don't know, maybe amendment needed is that in every case, maybe the policy could read so that it's not, the officer doesn't have to use discretion in considering what evidence is. I don't know. Ryan, can you tell me if that is that just part of policing, and we're gonna have to let it be subjective at that point?
I don't know if I completely understand what you're asking, but I mean, officers are trained to understand what evidence is as associated to any crime that's being explained to them or that they've identified. And so if there's any material, I mean, it could be anything. It could be, a cigarette butt. It could be anything that could potentially be evidence against, or that would help solve that crime. Then they're expected to capture that evidence, and all different ways that they can do it, depending upon what it is, the best practice on how to package all that stuff, and then submit that. Then if we submit evidence, we have to write a report. I think, Jose, maybe what might help here is that you were saying it does refer us back to the report writing manual. There are some very specific details in the report writing manual that talk about what things you need to do and when different things happen. And I might be best for me to take a look at that. It's hard for me because I'm just on a laptop right now to do that. And then I'd have to like pull away from you guys, and then I wouldn't be able to answer questions. But
sure,
I think it might be something that would be good. We could do a little research on that and maybe get back to you next week or next meeting on that or something.
That sounds great.
You make a good point, but I have a feeling that it's covered fairly clearly in the report writing manual. I just don't know it off the top of my head.
Cool. Yeah, I'm caught on one sense of thinking, I don't think that common sense is ever a good indicator, or is never a good grounding to make decisions on. Like, we shouldn't leave things up to like common sense. So I'm caught on one sense thinking like, over the course of my time on the Civilian Review Board, becoming a little bit more aware and understanding of the demands that are physical, emotional, and cognitive on officers in any given moment, and saying, well, how do we create good bureaucracy that helps, that puts officers in situations where making a good decision is easy, right? And on the other side of this, thinking like, man, this one seems awfully obvious, you know, where common sense would dictate that, like, you know, I mean, I think it's fair to say that in the world that we live in our corner of the world, something as like visible and an issue as visible and charged and consequential as something like possessing child pornography, which I think explicit pictures of minors is, I'm like, it almost seems fair to me to be like, that's common sense, dude. So yeah, that's where my thinking is at right now. If we're talking about policies and procedures, like, yeah, how do we set folks up to succeed, so that they don't have to think about whether this is evidence or not? And I don't know if that's one of the things at issue here. But I mean, I think, as I hear other folks saying, it's in no way unclear that a crime was committed. What I'll be more interested in talking about in the next round is like how we read untruthfulness and what constitutes untruthfulness, and how we make how it's a charged thing, right? How do we do justice to the victim in this situation in talking about this, as well as all the other folks who are involved?
Hi, I had an idea that I want to share. Is that okay? Sorry, it's not my turn. I know that. I don't have a turn. But just as Jose was speaking, I was thinking about, I've been trying to think of interesting training topics for next month, since we didn't do a training topic this month. Would a tour of the property control, evidence control unit be interesting to you all? Like going over there and seeing how they handle all of that? Michael, we could have you on FaceTime. Okay, all right. Thanks. I can look into that, see if we can get that set up.
I feel so cheated. I've been on this for 3 years and no field trips at all in 3 years.
Blame COVID. Sorry.
It's not your fault. So my turn, right? And this is policies and procedures and training. I don't have a lot to add to what other people say. I just found this one just so I don't know, like shocking for lack of a better word. Just I feel like, you know, I'm a mandatory reporter as a teacher, and you know, like just the bare minimum of what we're talking about here. I can't imagine any circumstances under which a teacher would not like feel like this was needed to be reported, much less a law enforcement officer. To write up a report on a minor being victimized in this way. I'm also confused. It is partly because I just didn't have enough time to scroll back and forth through all of the pages enough times to figure out what happened to the screenshots between 2020 and now. Because they weren't entered into evidence, but they were still around, and the officer still had them to sort of turn over. Am I right about that? So where were they in the meantime?
Ryan, I was going to ask you.
Yeah. Okay. So when it got reassigned, when it was found out that the no report was taken, it got reassigned to I think it was a detective or another officer. I can't remember. Anyway, when it got reassigned, they contacted the officer, and the officer still had him on his work cell phone, so he was able to have him send those images and some of the chat messages and that kind of stuff to the other officer's work cell phone.
So they were just it sounds like it was just a case where they were set aside and just the officer moved on to other things and had forgotten that they were there until they went to go look for them.
Yeah, I can't tell you if he forgot or not, but he definitely didn't do anything with them, and they still were on the phone. Yeah.
Okay.
I make
thank
it
you.
clear for the record that they were not explicit photos that the
Yeah,
officer was
no.
holding on the phone. I want to make that clear for the record and for public that they were like,
Yes, yes. Good,
they were
good
scribbled
correction.
over so you couldn't see it. And
Yes,
But
thank you for
but
saying
they
that.
were clearly evidence of attempts to get this young woman to, or the young person, sorry, to send more photos. I mean, they were in, to my completely untrained eye, they were clearly evidence of a crime, and or an attempted crime. And it's a good thing that they were still there, because right, it enabled this investigation, the second investigation, to happen. But I was just trying to like piece out, like, you know, if had they been like entered halfway, I just wasn't sure like why, if they weren't entered in evidence, where were they? So they were just sitting on the phone. Thank you.
all right, that was everybody for that one. So we'll move on to adjudication recommendations. Leah, are you ready? Is it possible to share this slide before we talk about it, just for another minute to like show that?
Yes, I will need a second.
Just because there are so many adjudication, I think it's helpful to see it all.
Right on. I understand. I just talk amongst yourselves.
Bernadette, you're going to go first.
Well, right. And I was going to say something before we got to the adjudication. So while she's working on that, is Jose, I agree that, you know, saying common sense is not something we should, you know, kind of rely upon. And I guess maybe it wasn't common sense so much as it's such a basic thing that officers should do, that a little bit different than common sense. Maybe it's splitting hairs there, but I think the idea is it's like, you don't have to teach an officer to start a car to do, you know, their training. I mean, to do their driving training. So I guess when I say common sense, this to me is like teaching an officer, you know, to start the car before you start to try and drive it. And also when I first started on the CRB, one of the things the first time, Sergeant Jerry Weber, who was the IA person at the time, one of the things that I remember him telling officers that he was investigating was always write a report and always put everything in the report, because not only does it help when I have to come back and talk to you later, you know, it's like you have all the information there. So make sure you follow up with the guy that's just standing behind the tree when you get in an altercation with somebody down by the river, because they might be the person that's going to keep you from getting in a lot of trouble. And so it's like, to me, that the idea that there wasn't a report written, you know, and, you know, especially given the nature of the photographs here, it's like the officers setting themselves up for having something on their phone that is evidence of a crime that they can't prove that they don't have because they wanted it and got it for their own benefit, as opposed to as part of a crime because they didn't write a report. So I hope that kind of makes sense as Leah
Yeah.
took the time to pop this
Let-
up here.
Let me just respond and say that I totally was not taking issue with what you had said about common sense. What you just said is helpful and clarifying. I think I'm trying to figure out I'm trying to figure out the grounding from which not everything should be laid down into policy. There should be some things that, right, yeah, like we shouldn't have to teach a kid to turn the car on. It's part of the process, right? And you know, in making recommendations, thinking about the role and importance of some information being tacit and baked into the process, Yeah, I think I was just having some, I just wanted to be responsible with how I was thinking about that and place that. So I appreciate that. And I wasn't, totally wasn't saying that in response to you also, Bernadette.
Oh, no, and I didn't think that you were, but I appreciated that you brought it up because we shouldn't expect that common sense is a basis for an allegation of misconduct or, an IA investigation, because it doesn't fit with our standard of common sense. But I think in this case, it wasn't common sense. It was just basic understanding of policing that is, to me, so basic that it's almost like common sense. So, all right. So now you want me to talk about the allegations. So I am.
Wait.
Oh,
Clay,
wait.
Clay, I saw your hand up. Did you?
Yeah, it went down. What the point I wanted to make was covered, so that's good. Thank you.
Before we talk about allegations, I think I want to just point out that what we're really focusing on in terms of paying attention, well, we're going to focus on all of them, but where there's disagreement between the auditor and the chain of command and the chief's final adjudication, that's what is important for us to really think about. So the first two allegations, I wanted to see this again to show that where they were not in agreement as opposed to when they were in agreement. Although if you don't agree with any of them, that's also worthwhile to say. So go ahead, Bernadette.
Okay, so with regards to allegation on preliminary investigations, I agree with the chain of command that it's unfounded. With duty to know and enforce the laws, I agree with the auditor that it should be sustained. With regards to judgment, I agree with both that it should be sustained. With regards to report evidence and submission, absolutely should be sustained. And with regards to truthfulness, I believe there's insufficient evidence.
Lindsay and Beatrice and Rob, do you think this is, if we just go through it this way, and is this sufficient for the report?
I think that's absolutely fine. And I guess I would just ask the minutes taker if you can do your best to capture as much of this as possible. But I think so. And it sounds like we'll think about some logistical ways to make this more painless in the future. I like Bernadette's idea. So, but for this meeting, this should be fine. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I made a poll.
Okay, we can still do the poll. Okay, it's my
Look at
turn.
you on the fly.
But Bernadette, thank you for sharing how to do that clearly and effectively. That was good modeling.
I'm a good modeling. I do a lot of modeling.
Okay, so I will follow her example. And Officer A, or preliminary investigations, I agree with the auditor that it was within policy. And the duty to know and enforce laws, I also agree with the auditor that it should have been sustained. And then for the remaining ones, I agree with everyone that as they said, sustained, and insufficient evidence.
And so I'm going to slow down the process because,
Hold on.
oh,
It's
did I
Jose's
go
turn.
out of turn again?
Sorry.
Sorry, Jose.
No, it's fine. I agree with the auditor that the first preliminary investigation allegations within policy, the duty to know and enforce laws, I find I had, this is why I think being so granular on the common sense stuff. I want to save my being outraged card and maybe only use that like once a year. But I feel a bit outraged on this one, that the policy says duty to know and enforce laws. Sworn employees and civilian employees in applicable job assignments must have a demonstrated knowledge of the law. This example is not a B-side deep track off of like a rarity. Again, I think given the consequential nature of what's going on here, I find it outrageous that the chain of command could see that as unfounded. I agree with the auditor that judgment sustained, report and evidence submission sustained. I want to know more about why the auditor saw this as insufficient evidence. Leah, could you, Leah, could you, I would love to hear you talk about this.
Sure. I'm gonna, I think that if, and this is searching my memory a little bit, I apologize, but the thing that compelled me a fair amount in this was that it was wrong. Like his statement, I don't think it was correct. I think but also the supervisor wasn't 100% clear in their memory of the conversation either. And I felt like for me to recommend a sustained on an untruthfulness, just knowing what that can do and the weight of that, I really want to be more sure than a little bit sure. And I don't know, and it's a hard one, and I welcome, you know me, I welcome feedback on these things, but it just wasn't quite there. I think if the supervisor had been like, oh, absolutely not, I would never have said that to anybody ever, you know, I remember that conversation clearly. I absolutely didn't give that impression. That's completely incorrect. That would have been very different. And I think if you think about, like, I think about my fights with, you know, maybe people I live with and how we remember conversations differently. So I don't know. I mean, I know that's fuzzy. I know that's not maybe very helpful, but that's kind of where I ended up, was just, I didn't have enough to me.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be so persistent about this issue. I think that the nature of the question, or the topic of the questioning, was, it's easy for us to sit back in hindsight and be like, nobody would ever make that recommendation, right? Which is why this is all so unclear to me. Like, yes, the officers might say, I don't recall that, and yet we have some consensus here that would never be something that anybody would say. Are people stressed out? I mean, I feel like when I'm under duress, my mom's an attorney. I was cross-examined as a kid many times. I know what that's like. And so oftentimes I feel like I was just kind of like saying things that came to me in my like heightened affective state, you know? So I'm gonna go with the auditor here.
Thank you. And I'm, as an attorney mom, I appreciate that.
You know? So preliminary investigations, Leah, I read your discussion of unfounded, like the definition of unfounded, and and this has come up before, I think, and so since it's coming up again, like I wonder if there's just, is this something where there's an ongoing disagreement, an interpretation between the auditor's office and EPD about when to use unfounded, and that's not going to get resolved anytime soon? Or is this a case where you're pointing out a mistake, but it's too late for them to change their adjudication? Or is there, would have been nice for the chief to have been here so we could have had that conversation, but what's the underlying like thing here?
That is a very good question, Michael. I'm not, you're right. It's not the first time it's come up. I think it's a discussion that I plan to continue to have. Because it is defined in the protocols, and those protocols were fought over for a very long time. And if there's momentum to abandon or to change those definitions, then I think we can talk about changing them. But if we're using the ones I maybe it's my grammar nerd, but I really like to use them as defined. And that's how I make those recommendations.
Well, and these are we're talking about policies here, right? So people love to talk about like exactly where, how things are used, shall versus will, all of those things. And so it would be nice going forward, and I know there have been other priorities the last couple of years, but it would be nice going forward, I think, for the CRB and Eugene, if EPD and the auditor's office could maybe have like a quick chat about what unfounded means and decide on a shared definition. Because it's at the end of the day, right, it's not what the biggest thing in this case,
Right.
but it's the moments of a disagreement are so few that it's jarring to sort of see them, and then I think some people might be tempted to make more out of it than actually
Right.
exists.
Yeah. And
So that's go ahead.
Mm-mm.
That's all I had to say about preliminary investigations, and so I would concur with the auditor on it. As far as duties to know and enforce the laws, this is allegation number 2. I agree with those of you who have said that you concur with the auditor and the reasons why. And the remaining 3, I also concur with the auditor and everyone else. But I would say that I share some of the hesitancy about allegation 5 and truthfulness. As it's been explained, it makes total sense, but it does seem, I think that the passage of time, right, makes this difficult. I think that the stakes with a truthfulness allegation, I think you spoke to it. It's possible that the supervisor was also feeling some of that and didn't necessarily want to say definitively about something that was a couple years ago, and but it seems yeah. So is that clear, Lindsay, how I landed on those? I lost track of whether
I think that was
Yeah,
clear.
no, that was super
Yeah.
clear.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I'm still doing the poll, you guys. I made a poll.
I'm looking forward to the poll.
Thank you, Clay.
I agree on preliminary investigations. I agree with the auditor that's within policy for all the reasons laid out in her memo. On duty to know and enforce laws, I also agree with the auditor that it is sustained, and disagree with EPD, chain of command in chief. On the final 3, I agree with unanimous findings. On truthfulness, I wanted to talk a little bit. I think that you kind of hit on this a little bit, Michael. I think that the supervisor also might be having a CYA moment of like, oh, maybe I did say that and I don't fully remember. And there's no way to find evidence to support one or the other side of that conversation, aside from what both are saying. And with the squishiness of what the supervisor said, it's just having an allegation of truthfulness be sustained would be a really hard thing to do. So I think the insufficient evidence makes a lot of sense here. It's not that it's absolved of. It's not that it's. I don't think there's a way to say that the officer involved is cleared of sort of the questioning about that. But for such a serious allegation, I don't think it's right to sort of pursue a different kind of allegation or finding. So that's why I agree with the finding, and I don't find it problematic given the conversation that happened with the supervisor as well, and the statements that they were able to make. Yeah, and I think, you know, the other aspect of that came into play for me is that I think this incident was really poorly executed, but it didn't demonstrate, you know, intentionally negligent behavior. In some ways, you know, I think police officers are human and they make mistakes. And I know this officer, it sounds like this officer has had a number of IA cases open concurrently. And so there's a lot of learning to be done. But it didn't seem to be something that was, you know, purposefully negligent or purposefully, you know, not helping a community member. I think there was evidence that this officer did want to help the community member that they were involved with in this case. So just didn't do it really with a fine-grained comb or with the policies and procedures that are pretty clear in my mind. So that's my take.
Let's do a poll.
Okay, launch. Do you guys see that? All
Yeah.
Look at that.
right.
You
so
have
I
to tell me
think
how you did that
Done.
during the meeting.
magic. No, I will. So to be clear, this is just for CRB members. All you staff folks on this call, don't be filling this out.
It says that hosts and panelists cannot vote.
Yeah.
Oh, it does? And panelists? Wait, who is this for? 0 of 2 participated. Who is this showing up for?
Your people in the audience?
I
Oh
think
my
it's
gosh. I'm so sorry, audience. It must be for the audience. So Michael, that
I would
was
love to
not
know what they
magic.
think.
That was a mistake, is what that was. Okay, I apologize. You guys, I'm so glad we were really careful with our note taking. I'm gonna try again. Thank you, Majeska. I appreciate that. Okay, Majeska saw the poll. Okay, I'm gonna try again for the next round. And we're gonna move on
Okay.
and forget that ever happened.
I think we are clear though.
Yes, we were.
I
I can never forget that happened. It's etched into my memory.
It was pretty poetic how that
And
happened.
on the YouTube too. It'll be great, you guys.
We can just edit that out. Okay, so we were going to discuss on selection of liaisons to Police Commission and Human Rights Commission, and it says 10 minutes, but I think we can do it faster than that so we don't continue to get behind. We do have, oh, now we can do it.
I got really excited. I apologize.
Yeah, now we can do it. At least I can do it. Can everyone else?
Yeah, it's there was a button.
Okay.
So you don't have to do it anymore, guys. Unless Carolyn says you do, but I'm just.
I mean, I'm a good student, so if I see it, I have to do it.
Okay.
I'm making double sure that I'm doing it correctly.
Yeah. Thank you for your participation.
Okay, I have 5 of 12 and there's 5 of you here, right? So that's good. All right.
Yay.
You guys are the best. All right, I'm gonna end the poll. And thank you, audience members, for not voting. I appreciate that.
Okay, so we're going to select the liaison. So we have Police Commission and Human Rights. And a while ago, we talked about switching this to the January meeting. So the people who joined the board in the summer, so like Clay and Alan this year, so that gives you enough time to kind of get a sense of, Majeska, we'll circle back. We'll finish this and then we'll come back and answer that question. I think that the results will be what we all said in our discussion. Okay, so we talked about moving it to January so the people like Clay and Alan have had 6 months to kind of get a sense of what the boards are and how they could fit in. But then it turns out we kind of never meet in January, so then we forgot about it in January. So I'm suggesting that we change the election in the future to February meetings, because we tend to have a February meeting, and then it would have the same effect as what we were trying to do before. Since that didn't happen this year, I'm going to suggest that we do it this week, this month, and then we'll start having the new elected or selected people attending the boards as soon as possible. With the human rights, that could be like tomorrow. With the police commission, it has to go through city council approval. So it might take a little bit longer, but the idea is if we have some overlap, then that helps. If the police commission thing takes longer, then, you know, Michael wouldn't step down right away, even if we select somebody else, because he already has city council approval. And then also the current liaisons would be there for a few months before the next person took over. So what I'm suggesting is that we select tonight, and that would be a term from now until February, essentially. And then from next year and forever, until people decide differently, the selection would happen in February. Any thoughts? Leah looks very thoughtful about this.
I may have been also dealing with the poll, but yes. So just to make sure I'm understanding, right? Because I was conflicted about this. So for HRC, we would be selecting a liaison starting now until next February. And then for police commission, we would be selecting someone who is probably starting July till next February. Does that make sense? Is that correct?
Well, it would, I think it would start whenever city council is able to approve. Does that not happen until July?
I would say council is going to be approving all of the new boards and commission members by June, and their calendar is bonkers. So I would not expect that anything else would make it in, but if we make it coincide with appointing new members, I think that could probably happen.
Okay, would it be possible for us to ask city council to approve somebody if we did this in February?
Yes, I think with enough advance notice, we could make that happen. Yeah.
Okay, so then I guess what I'm suggesting is this year we do it now, and then Michael would stay in the position until his term is up
Yeah, through June, Michael.
in June,
You're
for
not
both.
gone yet.
for both this board and that board
Yeah.
or commission, and then, but we'll still know who that'll be, so the process can get going to appoint them.
Right.
Yes. And then in future years, we'll appoint and hopefully change closer to February.
Yeah.
Okay. Is everybody okay with that process? Do we need to vote on this process? I don't think so, because it's not like a bylaw or anything, right? This is what we want to do. Okay. So I know that Alan was interested in police commission, and Alan is not here to say that, but I will go ahead and nominate Alan to be our representative to police commission on his behalf.
Yeah, and I'll second that. I talked with Alan about that.
Is there any other nominations that would like to be put forward?
Well, I was going to say I'm interested in it, but then it's kind of complicated because I might not be reappointed to this board. And so that kind of, I mean, it's so Alan has obviously his term is going to go through it. So as much as I would be interested in doing it again, I think it kind of complicates things in the sense that if everybody said yes, and then city council says, no, you can't be on the CRB, then it'd be like, oh, it's just making more work for you guys. So anyway, I'll try it again another round if I'm back. They let me come back. Never know.
I appreciate the interest, and I appreciate your reasoning also. So anything else? Okay, I don't see any other nominations in the chat or verbal. So we have a nomination and a second. Do we vote on appointing or selecting Alan? Looks like Leah's working on a poll.
I was actually working on the poll for the next case, but I did just realize, I think
No,
you
that's
should
good.
just raise hands.
I
Can you
think
just,
that's what I was gonna
Thank
suggest.
you.
That we can just raise hands. So are all people in favor of appointing or suggesting, putting forward Alan to the city council to be our police commission liaison? Raise your hand if you approve of this. All right, that passes. That's what we'll put forward. Human Rights Commission, Jose, you've been doing this. Are you interested in continuing in your role?
I am. I didn't get to, I think because of COVID things, wasn't able to participate, was kind of out of communication, but was put in communication with their liaison today. Thank you. I think it was Beatrice, who sent me who put us in touch. So I'll be happy to continue this work. If nobody else wants to do it, if somebody else feels really compelled, I will totally step aside.
I think Bernadette's in the same position that with the police commission. So Clay, are you interested in Human Rights Commission?
Yeah, for both of these, I am interested, but right now it's not feasible really for me with the work that I have. And so if Jose's interested in continuing, I totally support that. That sounds great. Yeah.
All right. So raise your hand if you support Jose continuing as Human Rights Commission liaison. All right. That's a unanimous also. I like it when it's unanimous. That makes it easy. Okay, so we're going to take a 5-minute break. Let's return at 6:56. That's 5 minutes.
I'm going to share the results just while we're gone. That's it. That's the same as before. Okay, stop sharing. Welcome back.
Okay. Clay's back, Michael's back, I'm back. Bernadette is back, and Jose, I'm sure we'll be back soon. Leah, were you able to share the poll results for the oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah, that's what you guys said.
And attendees, Majeska, are you able to see that? Just since you were asking, I want to make sure.
Yay. Okay, I'll stop sharing now.
Thank you. Okay, so case number 2, review. I was trying to come up with some creature report ditty for that, but it didn't work, so.
Go for it, Rob.
I need,
Oh, is Lindsay sharing?
yeah, I need Lindsay to bring it up or you.
I
to
am.
give me-
Hold
See?
on.
See,
Teamwork, you guys.
exactly. She's awesome.
Sorry, having a little difficulty. It'll be just a second.
All right.
It's all you, Rob. I'll advance.
Okay. So case number 2, Officer A was dispatched to Springfield from Springfield PD. He took custody of a juvenile with an outstanding warrant. And Officer A transported the juvenile to Lane County Youth Services for lodging. When the juvenile got to the youth services, the staff refused to accept him. They had some knowledge of the juvenile, and behavior was a little bit not normal, so they requested the juvenile go to the University District Hospital for an evaluation. So Officer A requested a cover officer, Officer B, to meet him at the hospital. When they were going in the hospital, Officer A and the juvenile were joined by Officer B, and then they're proceeding through the hospital, walking down a hallway, when the juvenile kind of started speed walking, I believe is how Officer A described it. And Officer A told the juvenile to knock it off, and then he or she, Officer A, maintained custody of the juvenile's handcuffs as they navigated the hospital, trying to maintain custody of the control, really, of the juvenile. So now I'm ready for the next one. So then the juvenile, Officer A and Officer B entered an exam room. Officer A instructed the juvenile to sit on the bed. Juvenile called Officer A bitch, and then kind of turned facing Officer A. So they had a little confrontation. Officer A grabbed the head and then the neck and the shoulder of the juvenile and kind of led the juvenile into a squatted position. Officer A then grabbed the juvenile's arm and helped the juvenile stand back up, and then directed the juvenile to the examination bed. After this occurrence, the juvenile complained of a neck injury from the contact between the juvenile and Officer A. So the staff at the hospital conducted an exam of the juvenile and eventually cleared the juvenile for detention at Lane County Youth Services. Officer B then notified their supervisor of the incident and said that force was unnecessary. So a review was conducted of the incident, and it revealed that Officer A didn't properly document the use of force in a report, didn't notify Officer A's supervisor, and didn't make an entry into Blue Team. So Lieutenant C got involved and initiated an internal affairs investigation into Officer A's actions. And then here are the allegations. So it was use of force. Officer A used force in excess of reasonable circumstances, and then reporting the use of force. So didn't properly document the use of force, didn't notify supervisor, and didn't complete a Blue Team entry. And then here are the allegations and the recommendations. So it was agreed upon between the auditor, the chain of command, and the chief for use of force within policy, reporting the use of force sustained. And then now, Carolyn, it's off to you to start the discussion.
Thank you. And actually, it's my turn to start the discussion. So that's what we'll do. We'll start with complaint intake classification, investigation, and monitoring. I think, as with the first case, it was appropriate and effective. Ryan, again, did a good job with the investigation. I don't think I have anything to add other than I think that it was the correct allegations. And I do appreciate, obviously, always when it's an internal allegation or an internal complaint. I think it shows a lot for the department that they feel comfortable doing that and that they are willing to come forward and talk about it. And I think that the Officer B handled it very well in terms of thinking about the event, looking back at their body cam and kind of rethinking it, and then bringing it to their supervisor. So that's all I have to say. Jose, it's your turn.
I don't have a comment on this round. I believe I'll have more to say on the next round. Michael.
Yeah. So I agree with Carolyn. I mean, for both of these, it was nice to see the internal reporting. I think that the more frequently we see that, the more I think the public should be reassured that there are internal mechanisms that are working within EPD for checking to make sure that the policies are being followed and that that things are going smoothly, even when they're not, if that makes sense. Even when things don't go smoothly, that the oversight process catches them. So that said, I think that's all I really have on this for this round.
I don't have anything to add. I concur with what Carolyn was saying about this.
One thing I questioned is in the slideshow we just had, it said Officer B informed supervisors because they thought the use of force was unnecessary. But as I recall, the officer that their eyes thought everything was fine. It was only after they watched their body cam and saw the hand placement of Officer A that made them concerned about the use of force or how it looked on the body cam, then went to see how it was written up and then saw that it wasn't written up and brought it to the supervisor's attention. And so it wasn't, at least I didn't read that Officer B thought that the use of force was unnecessary. It was just because it was such a split second sort of thing. It was more just that it wasn't documented. Did I misunderstand that?
I think
That's how I remember it too.
yeah, so that is definitely the explanation that was given as a part of the investigation. Like
Okay.
when that interview happened, that was the explanation. And I think at the time it was entered into blue team. If I remember right, I think it was the unnecessary language, but over time that more fuller story came out. Does that make sense?
Right. And I think as I recall, I mean, it was like why it wasn't written up is because there wasn't an injury. Could be questioned. But it also, it almost seemed like it wasn't a use of force. It was more a controlled fall. So I guess I kind of have a question about what, and I didn't think that this was kind of asked or really brought out much, is what made this incident a use of force because of where the hands were? Or was there something else that made it a use of force? Because as I was watching it, I mean, because when you watch the whole hour and a half conversation contact that this officer had with this juvenile up until that moment, it was, I never like to use the term textbook de-escalation, but the officer really built a rapport with this juvenile. The fact that the juvenile even got out of the car the first time, I mean, just in having that conversation in the original parking lot, I was pretty surprising to me. And so there was, I don't know if mutual respect is exactly probably the right way to say it, but this officer really was treating this juvenile, I thought, in a very professional manner. And a couple of things. So the way I always do it, I always read the reports first, and then I watch the videos. And so in watching Officer A's video, I think a couple of things that struck me was, how quickly it happened, but also that there was a wet floor sign there. And they were saying, don't go in there. Originally, they said, don't go in that room because the floor is wet and it's really small. And there was a thing on the wall. And so in my mind, as I'm watching this in Officer A's camera, it's like all of these things led me to kind of think, well, it was that, how was it that this person started to crumple to the floor? Was the wet floor have anything to do with it? Was the hand on the head have anything to do with the thing on the wall that you don't want them to hit their head on the wall? Obviously, that's what I'm seeing as I'm watching the video. Then, like Officer B, when you watch Officer B's video, you get a different point of view, which is what's so interesting about, memory and the body cams, because the body cam is on the body So it's not at the same vantage point as to where the officer is seeing things. And so the officer B saw one thing, but yet the body camera caught something completely different. And it didn't look good with the hand on the head and the hand on the neck as the person was going to the floor. So so anyway, so all of this was to kind of lead me to question what is the standard for something to be called a use of force as opposed to a controlled fall? Not saying that this was a controlled fall, but I'm just curious as to whether that could be defined.
So in the 800.6, the reportable use of force, that's the most applicable thing that I found was it, and that's requiring the reporting, but it's any intentional act by an EPD employee that results in a subject's physical injury.
Right. And so I guess the question is, was this an intentional act by the officer? And it's like, and if this was not an intentional act, then there wasn't a use of force and there wasn't something to report. So we're all jumping to the conclusion that because their hands were on them and they ended up on the ground, there was a use of force. And that's where I'm not sure that preliminary thing is met for me.
Okay, I that's interesting. My memory was that the employee in their interview agreed, but I admittedly could be wrong on it.
No, I think the employee did. I think the employee did what we're all doing, which is officer has hands on person, person ends up on the ground, therefore use of force must have happened. I mean, like that's what it seems to me, and intellectually that makes sense in all but a few cases. And so the thing that made more sense to the officer is to say, well, there wasn't an injury, so there wasn't a use of force necessary, the report necessary. And so I kind of go back and I'm like, yeah, but I'm not even sure there was a use of force. So anyway, I put that out there because it wasn't questioned by anybody, but I wonder if it should have been.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
That was everybody. Sorry, kind of lost track there for a second. Okay, so we're going to go to EPD policies, practices, training, and Jose, please start us with that.
Yeah, could you one more time tell us what constitutes a use of force?
I can tell you what constitutes a reportable use of force. But yeah, so it's in 800.6, and it's an employee, it says an employee will promptly notify his or her supervisor if involved in an incident listed below, and one of them is any intentional act by an EPD employee during the performance of his or her police duties resulting in a subject's physical injury, as defined in, hold on one second, I'm gonna cough. As defined in ORS 161.015. That's the full thing. Do you want, I can put that in the chat, Jose, is that better?
Is it established that this juvenile's injuries were the result of the use of force?
I would say, I don't know that there was like a diagnosis, like here's your diagnosis and it is because of this. No. It was more that the complaint of pain occurred after the contact with the employee and not before.
And that the employee didn't report because they didn't believe that that was a reportable use of, not all use of forces are reportable, and
Right.
that was one of them, right?
Well, it was more like, so the chronology of all this, I think, makes a difference. You know, like the report came in from Officer B. We watched the video from Officer A and Officer B, and there's no write-up anywhere. right? So we don't have the perspective of Officer A at all. And that was kind of the like, well, we need to find out about what happened here. And my tools are limited in finding out what happened. And my main tool is to open up an IA investigation, right? So that's kind of the road it went on. There wasn't any, like, I didn't have any idea why it wasn't reported. You know, does that make sense, Jose? Is that kind of where you're going? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why we report certain things, and it is to sometimes it's to protect yourself in these situations. Is that kind of where we're going?
I mean, I guess for me, it's a little related to the last one, right? Like, just a report would have helped so much. And I would say, like, you know, we review every use of force that's reported and try to see if the report sort of matches the video, you know, and we look for a lot of different things when we're reviewing those. So in this one, it was just, this came in, it definitely looked like a use of force to me, and it didn't have any explanation for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the grounding for my thinking here would be, you know, what are we trying to promote here? And if we're trying to promote a culture of reporting, defaulting on reporting, you know, I'm trying to say this without piling on, you know, or without making comments in bad faith, but to say that, you know, a recommendation, you know, if I'm thinking about a recommendation, I'm thinking about what I want that recommendation to do. So yeah, thank you.
Well, and I think, you know, once I was able to hear from the employee why these choices were made, I did recommend that it was within policy, right? Like I just needed an explanation.
What wasn't within policy, according to the auditor's office, was
Yes.
the reporting.
I just
correct?
checked to make sure. The reporting was sustained. That was a sustained violation policy. But the actual hands on the person in custody, I did recommend that was within policy.
Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, this has been a good conversation because it has clarified for me some of the things about this. So I also I watched the body worn video at last after reading it. I was expecting to see something much more physical between the officer and the child, and so. Yeah, when I watched the video, I thought, well, you know, if I had just been watching that video, I don't know that I would have necessarily, you know, looks like the kid slipped, or, you know, they're having, it seemed to me like they were having other coordination issues down the hallway, and so, like, you know, who knows what was going on, but in the interview, right? I mean, it is clear that the officer, right? So this is on page 10, right? Went on to, or 34, depending on how you count the page numbers. Officer went on to tell me they believed the child's complaint of injury was the result of their physical altercation, but they did not believe the child was injured as a result of the hair hold. Officer advised takedowns that don't result in injury or damage are not reportable. So it seems clear that the officers believe this was a takedown, right? Which may or may not be reportable because there may or may not be an injury, right? But the child does complain of pain right afterwards, and so it does seem reasonable to me to expect that to be reported. Especially again, since although a very tall and big child, it is still, we are still talking about a child.
Can I say something, Carol? I think it's in there. I didn't review this report right before this, but my recollection is that the doctor released him with some instructions for a sprained neck as well. So just as a consideration on your guys' end.
Yeah, I think to me, pulling someone's hair is a use of force. If you're not going to do it to, I just think as a police officer, you have to be liberal with your idea of what use of force is now, and you should report it, and you should take it up the chain of command, just let people know. I think this was a reasonable use of force, but it was a use of force. And so whether or not even there was I can't actually really tell what happened with the neck, and it's hard to see from the videos, and it was so fast, but pulling someone's hair to get them to comply is a use of force to me. And so if it's that clear, it seems like it should have been reported. And I think we're just talking about policy, procedure, and that stuff now. Yeah. So I think it was clearly defined, and I think the policy is clear in that regard. So that's all I'm saying about that now.
I just had one quick follow-up. Is there a policy, a requirement that if someone is injured while in police custody, whether it's by a police officer or they're smashing their head against the back of the car in the cage in the car? I say that backwards. Anyway, if they hurt themselves while in a police car, does that need to be documented? Is there something that requires that to be written up as well?
Sorry, I don't have the policy in front of me right now, but I definitely see those reports all the time, and I would hope that they are, because there's a liability and a risk issue related to that and a lot of other reasons. But
Right.
My gut feeling, this is one of those, my gut feeling is yes, but I need to go read the manual. And if you want me to do that during the meeting, I can, but I'm going to be checked out.
No, that's it. I guess the reason I'm asking is because as I talk these things through with people, it helps me clarify things. And so it's basically, there was going to be a need to put this in a report, whether it was they hurt themselves by slipping and falling and hitting their head and the officers got their hands on them, or we call it a use of force and they hurt themselves. Either way, there would be a requirement to put something in there. It's just a matter of what's required to put in there, and whether we call it a use of force or not. Something was missing from a report that should have been in there. Okay, thanks.
Was that your whole comment, Bernadette? Because it is your turn now. Were you responding, or was that it?
It's my turn.
I think
My
so.
turn to talk about
Policies and practices and training.
Oh, yeah, I guess, yes, that's what I was trying to figure out, is the policies, whether there was something that was required to be written down. And I wasn't trying to say that this was not a use of force. I think it was one of those things that it's like, I think we all just went right there that it was a use of force. And I think there were some things in watching the video that made me question whether it was a use of force or not a use of force. And that's why I think these conversations are good. Yeah, and I think that I don't think there's any training that really needs to happen. I think it's just one of those things that it's just a not so gentle reminder by having an IA file open to do what you're supposed to do.
All right. I think the only thing that stood out to me, similar to what Clay was saying about any sort of like hair pulling, something that can cause an injury, like as Ryan pointed out, that it wasn't sprained neck, should be considered use of force. And I think one thing that was a little bit off-putting to me in the interview was how it seemed like Officer A was using the fact that the juvenile was being threatening as a reason to use force. Like they were trying to swear to me to kick me or hit me or headbutt me. It almost seemed like they were trying to use that as an excuse to why they did it, or that it doesn't count as a use of force because they were being defensive about it. Oh gosh, my chair. I think that's all I have to add or agree with, as it were. So now adjudication. Oh, Leah.
No, Brian was raising his hand.
Sorry.
So I think it's really important too, and I think it was clear, but maybe not. I just want to make sure everybody understands. So like, no question, pulling a hair hold is absolutely a use of force. But there's a difference between use of force and a reportable use of force within our policy. So it does meet the definition. We actually train it. It is a control hold that we use at times, but it is a use of force. It's just if there's absent an injury, then it's not a reportable use of force. So that's kind of the line there. So if anybody had any questions about that, I'm happy to expand further on it. But I just want to make sure that you understand that we do consider that a use of force. Absolutely.
I guess I did have another question. Because this is a juvenile, and both of our cases being with juveniles, I think it adds a different level of questioning. Are there different, is it differentiated between what sort of force can be used on a juvenile versus an adult, even an adult-sized juvenile, as has been pointed out?
No, I mean, it still comes back to the Graham-Conner factors. It comes back to reasonableness. It comes back to severity of the crime, all of those things. So there is no differentiation. I mean, when we talk about use of force, we do, and in particular, I was thinking about tasers because I was just looking at that policy, but we talk about, people like pregnant people or somebody up high on a building or a ladder or something like that. I mean, we take those things into consideration when we choose the force options that we have available to us, but age is not, well, age is not one of them. It's what is being presented to you that you have to control, and the severity of that and the dangers to yourself or to others.
So back to common sense again.
Yes, somewhat.
So yeah, the use of force policy lists out a lot of factors, sort of trying to fleshing out the Graham factors. And one of them is, there's conduct of the individual, and then it's officer versus subject factors such as age, size, relative strength, skill level. So it's not specifically like you don't use force on juveniles, but it is consider the age of the person you're dealing with. And I mean, that's elderly or young, right? So.
Clay, you were unmuted. Did you?
I think that was by accident, but I just wanted to say thanks to Ryan for mentioning that differentiation between use of force and reportable use of force. But my understanding was, so I think it was a use of force. And then my understanding was that the officer knew that there was a complaint of harm, of injury, and the report of a sprain in the neck, right, during the incident. And so to me, that's pretty clear. Even if it's completely reasonable use of force, you want to just document that. And yeah, that's all.
Anything else before I move on to adjudication recommendations from anybody? Okay, so
Do you want the poll first or last?
I like it after the discussion because
Okay.
often I will change my mind after I hear what people have to say. So
Yes, ma'am.
Michael, can you start us off on adjudication recommendations? And I don't know, do we want to see the slide like we did last time? It looks like we do. Good. It is helpful, even with
Lindsay. Thank you, Lindsay.
How much do you like having help, Leah?
You guys, it is the best. I would gush for hours and it would bore you, but no, they are amazing.
All right, thank you for that refresher. So there's agreement between auditor and chain of command and chief on both allegations. Short and sweet, I agree with both of the adjudications, I agree with the adjudication on both of the allegations. In this case, I feel like I've talked about the adjudication already, so I'll stop.
I also agree with the adjudication on both allegations.
I just want to say briefly that I understand the officer's position when he talks about the standard of what is an injury, because what is an injury to us? Because he did say, as I recall, the officer said they recall the juvenile saying that their neck hurt, but wasn't sure whether or not they heard that there was a report of a sprain. And so, and I understand the officer's position in that what a common person might say is an injury isn't necessarily the same thing as the court of law will say is an injury. So when they're saying, well, there is nobody, if this injury had been committed on this juvenile by another person other than the officer, that there would not have been a charge of assault, which requires an injury, because they couldn't have shown that there was injury. So I understand the officer's reasoning behind it, but also because there was a report by the physician that they believed that there could be a sprained neck. I understand why this is considered a reportable use of force. So I agree with the use of force was within policy, but that it was sustained for not filling out the report.
I agree with both adjudication for both things. I agree with that's, I don't know how to be more clear. I agree.
I agree with the auditor on both allegations.
That was everybody. We're a small group tonight. That goes quickly. Okay, so poll. Did you get everybody, Leah?
Oh, yeah, now I do.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. This is a fancy new toy for me.
All right, now it's time for the auditor report. And hey, we caught up with our time almost perfectly. Go team.
Sorry, you guys. Oh, Lindsay, would you mind stopping sharing? Thank you. Auditor's report. I wrote you something. Do you have questions on what I wrote, or do you want me to talk more, or how do you want to do this now that I'm doing a written auditor's report? It's an awkward time to ask. I understand that.
I didn't read it.
Oh, thanks, Michael. That's good. Okay, let me go find it. Basically, we've worked very, very hard. My staff are amazing. I'll get down to brass tacks in a minute. But one major thing that I do want to make sure to mention is, we mentioned it earlier, however, the boards and commissions applications close on Friday. So please reach out to your networks and make sure that anyone you think would be a good part of our group, would have valuable insight, go ahead and try to get them to apply. And in the alternative, if you think that they might help with choosing who would be good on this group, let me know. I'll be meeting with the mayor to figure out our selection subcommittee soon. So that's a slightly smaller time commitment than what you all put in every month. So let me know about that. Basically, big things are, we are working on the annual report, hoping to have that done this month. I've been working with the city attorney. We're going to be making a presentation to council before the break on the history of oversight in Eugene, sort of what got us to this point, and then also how our process works. Just I think we have a lot of folks in the community who don't have to engage with us or don't maybe know that we are here. So just giving that really public forum of how we got here and what we do, that'll be coming up. I've been trying to do more outreach. I presented at Lane County Public Defender's Office. I'm going to be teaching at U of O Law School next week in the local government law class. I went and spoke to their public policy law students group, and I think I have one more, but I can't remember, you guys. It's just been a lot. I'm working on the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement Communications Committee. So we're working on getting word out not only about civilian oversight as sort of a concept, but also that organization and different ways that it can help folks with mostly networking, getting people in touch with other places that do this and other models so we can learn from each other about what's effective and what's not. Let's see, Beatrice did a lot of outreach for boards and commissions. She and I wrote to the members of the ad hoc committee. she reached out to people who had applied for CRB before and hadn't gotten on. So we've done a much bigger outreach push than we've ever done before for CRB. And I'm excited to see what the results are from that. We are still working on our public portal, our community portal. We have one more demonstration from a vendor, and then I think we'll be able to make a choice about who we're going to go forward with. I'm still hoping that we can get that online before June. So I'm excited about that. We've been closing a lot of cases. Lindsay and Rob are getting up to speed on doing the investigations and helping those reporting out. So I'm really excited we've cleared the backlog of all the uses of force. They've cleared the backlog of all the uses of force. And yeah, so I'm excited to see how a fully staffed auditor's office can work in the next year or so. I'm very excited about that. And yeah, we talked about the annual report, and then, we're working on our mediation process. We had one sort of test case where I was the named complainant, so it was kind of an easy way to see how that would go. But it's been interesting, working with the union and working with IA to make sure that we cover all of our bases and figure out how we can make that work in a more efficient manner. Because in the past, it just hasn't been a swift result in any way. But I'm excited to see how that's going. Let's see. Yeah, I think those are the high points. I have a couple other things that I don't think are worth mentioning right now, but yeah, Bernadette, what's your question?
Are you still interim or is
Okay.
it permanent?
So we are going to talk about that.
Okay, no, never mind. I was just going to say, I think if the auditor's report had been right after the agenda, it would have been more noticeable. It kind of got buried at the back of all the case reviews, the cases that have closed. And I think that's it, because I saw it, but it was only like at the last minute that I was like looking through cases and I went, oh, auditor's report, I should read that. So
right. Well,
I would
we
just
can move
suggest,
that.
and with regards to the CRB's report, is that being done by, I thought there was something in the notes that maybe it was asking for input, asking for committee, or no, that's just going to be done by us, or no?
Lindsay and Rob are taking lead on that.
Okay. That was news to Rob.
I know, sorry.
Wait, the auditor's report or the CRB report? I'm sorry, both of them?
Okay, so the
The
CRB
reason I'm
report,
asking,
didn't
the
you
reason
meet?
no, I got tied up at work. I didn't get to the meeting. The reason I'm bringing it up is because the notes that I saw said that the ad hoc committee's report was going to be in the CRB's report. And I'm not really sure I understand why we would want any of the ad hoc report in the CRB report.
I wanted it to be linked just because we had members who were on that committee, and I think that it was important that that closed up in April. So I think it's good to know that that was part of the work that we did.
Got it. Okay.
And it does talk a lot about CRB and the nature of the CRB. So I wanted to put that in there as a link, not like as part of the report, but it's like
just a link. This was one of the things that we did. Okay, that makes sense to me. Anyway, that's all. It's a great report. Thanks for that monthly report.
No problem. I was gonna say it might have been included last because it was definitely the last thing to get finished. But I can try harder next month. Shoot, yes. So yes, I am still interim, to answer your question, Bernadette. I'll just say I'm going to meet with council next week to try to get more details on what their ideas are for me. And I don't know if they're planning on any kind of evaluation process, but in the past, the evaluation process has definitely included feedback from CRB members. So just if that comes your way, I'll probably get in touch with you before that comes your way, but just that's something that might be coming in the next few months. Jose looks like he's getting ready to go outside.
Sorry, I've been on campus today since like 9 in the morning. So I'm like just trying to maximize my time.
Yeah, you gotta get going. Sorry. No, yeah. And I will then finish up my auditor's report because I know everyone has busy nights.
okay. Jose, I like how you're in your full winter clothes too. This is ridiculous for April.
It's
But,
cold out here, man. It's April and it's snowing. What?
My kid's playing soccer right now, so that's awesome. Okay, we do have a few minutes for closing comments from board members, and Clay, it is your turn to get us going.
It's nice to see you all again. That's my closing comment. Thanks for the thorough reviews.
I hope we get to meet in person soon, because as much as I love the polls on Zoom, I prefer to see people and have these conversations, these lively exchanges without having to mute and unmute constantly.
I agree. It sounds like our training next month might be in person, so that might mean that our meeting would also be in person. So that might be something that the staff is looking into. I don't know. That is my only closing comment. Again, thank you everybody for coming and for being part of this. Good work.
Yes, the May training, if I'm looking at in-person options, although I wouldn't be there. But council met last night in person, so we have the technology available for hybrid meetings, and I'm going to be working with the CMO to see how we can potentially use that space for our June meeting, if that's what you want.
Yeah, I prefer to start meeting in public person too. I just also want to say I don't want to, like, if I'm gonna spoil the process, then I'll shut up. But if there's any way that I can advocate for you to be in a more permanent position, then I would like to know how to do that. So please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. That's really nice. Thank you.
I was going to say something mean, and I thought, no, I can't be mean to Leah because it's going to end up on YouTube and people don't know me and they think I'm just being mean. I won't say. But it was. I would also love to see you all again in person before I cycle off this board. It sounds like that would be in June for a meeting, but the training maybe will be in person in May. If I have enough of a heads up about the date for that, I can try to be there in person for that. I would love to be there in person for that. I would also say that oh no, that's all.
All right, then with that, we can adjourn 7 minutes early. Go team, I love it. Our next meeting is May 10th, and then June 14th, and then July 12th. Have a good month before we see each other again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.